A Turkic etymological perspective on Sudan, Aswan, and SOBEK. Abstract. This study re-evaluates the historical and etymological origins of the toponyms Sudan and Aswan, which are conventionally attributed to Arabic derivations from Aswad, black, and Bilad al-Sudan, land of the blacks. While this interpretation dominates modern scholarship, evidence from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic records, Coptic textual sources, and early toponymic patterns indicates a far older linguistic root, the Turkic word su, water. The analysis demonstrates that the naming logic of these regions was grounded in a water-centric worldview, a core principle of Turkic thought, and that this influence was deeply embedded in the Nile basin long before Arab contact and even before the classical Greco-Roman period. This study argues that the semantic and phonetic continuity from ancient Egyptian through Coptic into later periods reflects an enduring Turkic linguistic and conceptual presence. Modern Western scholarship, in prioritizing Semitic and Indo-European frameworks, has systematically overlooked this evidence, despite its clear manifestation in toponyms. 1. Introduction, revisiting a forgotten linguistic layer. Mainstream narratives of Nile Basin history often portray the region's linguistic and cultural heritage as a sequence dominated by ancient Egyptian, Coptic, Arabic, and later colonial languages. This linear perspective obscures the reality that Turkic linguistic structures and conceptual frameworks were present in ancient Egypt thousands of years before the Ottoman Empire. The neglect of this layer is not accidental. Modern historiography, shaped by Eurocentric paradigms, has tended to subsume African and Middle Eastern etymologies under Greco-Roman, Semitic, or modern colonial languages, leaving pre-Semitic, pre-Indo-European influences marginalized. Yet place names are among the most enduring cultural artifacts. And in the Nile Basin, they preserve the imprint of a Turkic worldview where water was both a practical and metaphysical organizing principle. 2. Aswan Aswad, a case of Turkic water-centric naming. In ancient Egyptian sources, present-day Aswan was called Swnw, Swenit, denoting the southern frontier at the first cataract of the Nile. In Coptic, the name appears as Suan, later adapted into Arabic as Aswan. Phonetic analysis reveals that the initial SWN Su corresponds directly to the Turkic Su, water. Given Aswan's hydrological centrality, the Nile's navigational limits, fertile riverbanks, and role as a natural border, the water-based etymology aligns with the Turkic naming logic found across Eurasia, where settlements were named for their relationship to rivers, lakes, and springs. The transformation from Swnw Su and Aswan preserves both the phonetic root and the semantic field of water, resisting Arabic reinterpretation as aswad, black, for which there is no credible historical evidence in pharaonic or Coptic records. 3. Sudan and Nubia, hydrological centrality over ethnic interpretation. The modern name Sudan is often claimed to derive from the Arabic as-sudan, land of the blacks. However, Arab arrival in the 7th century CE came long after the toponymic traditions of the region were established. Ancient Egyptian texts refer to southern territories as Kush, Wawat, Tarseti, and Yam, while Nubia described northern and central Sudan. A recurring phonetic pattern, Subu-Nu, links these toponyms to the Turkic Su, denoting water-rich lands. The confluence of the White and Blue Nile in central Sudan represents one of the most agriculturally productive and strategically vital locations in antiquity, reinforcing the likelihood that names reflected hydrological importance rather than skin color. Arabic ethnographic reinterpretations, focusing on complexion, obscure the earlier and more pragmatic naming logic rooted in geography, resource distribution, and the life-giving role of the Nile. 4. Turkic conceptual and linguistic presence in ancient Egyptian thought. The persistence of Su-based toponyms from the pharaonic period through the Coptic era indicates not merely a lexical coincidence, but a deeper cultural integration. In Turkic cosmology, water is the primordial element from which life and order emerge, a principle that resonates strongly with ancient Egyptian creation myths, where the Nile's inundation was central to agricultural renewal and cosmic balance, Ma'at. This conceptual parallel suggests more than linguistic borrowing, it reflects shared epistemological frameworks. The ancient Egyptian practice of naming territories for their hydrological features mirrors Turkic geographic categorization systems documented across Central Asia and into Anatolia. Coptic scribes preserved these names with remarkable phonetic fidelity, enabling the survival of this linguistic heritage through successive cultural shifts. Even in the Ottoman period, official records referred to southern Egypt and northern Sudan as Bilad-i Turkiye, acknowledging a historical Turkic association that predates Ottoman governance by millennia. 5. SOBEK as SUBAY, a Turkic etymology for the crocodile deity. Among the prominent deities of the ancient Egyptian pantheon, SOBEK are particularly high status. Traditionally depicted with the head of a crocodile, SOBEK was associated with the power and fertility of the Nile, protection of the pharaoh, and the might of the waters. Yet Egyptologists remain divided over the origin and linguistic classification of the name SOBEK. While many scholarly treatments attempt to situate the name within reconstructed ancient Egyptian lexicons, there is no consensus on a purely native derivation. From the Turkic linguistic perspective, the etymology becomes transparent: Su, water, plus bey, lord, chieftain, master, yielding SUBEYİ, literally lord of the waters. This reading is not merely a speculative folk etymology but aligns directly with the zoological and symbolic role of the crocodile in the Nile ecosystem. In both Turkic and ancient Egyptian cultural logic, the crocodile could justifiably be regarded as the supreme ruler of the aquatic domain, powerful, feared, and sovereign in its environment. The persistent scholarly reluctance to acknowledge such a clear parallel raises methodological questions. The debate over whether SOBEK belongs to the Egyptian language reveals an underlying discomfort. Accepting a Turkic derivation would imply that ancient Egyptian civilization may have spoken, or at least incorporated, a dialect or branch of the Turkic language family. The fear of such a conclusion is not scientific but ideological, reflecting entrenched historiographical biases rather than objective philological analysis. For over 5,000 years, the name SOBEK has stood in the historical record. If analyzed without preconception, the Turkic Su derivation emerges as the most semantically coherent, culturally appropriate, and phonetically plausible origin. Recognizing SOBEK as SUBEYİ in linguistic terms strengthens the case for an active Turkic linguistic presence in the earliest phases of Egyptian civilization. An examination of the hieroglyphic spelling traditionally transliterated as SBK reveals iconographic elements that reinforce the Turkic SUBEYİ reading. In the right-to-left and top-to-bottom arrangement, the first sign depicts a water vessel whose upper right contour includes either a distinct handle or a visual cue indicating liquid content, most plausibly water, Su. Within the conventions of Egyptian logography, this is among the most unambiguous representations of the water concept. Beneath this sign appears the crocodile ideogram, whose precise phonetic value in this context remains debatable, though it is clearly associated with aquatic sovereignty in Egyptian iconography. To the left, the leg hieroglyph, ba or bay of Turkic barjak, unambiguously signals the babe syllable. The final sign, with a curved extension to the right, can plausibly be correlated with either Old Turkic ka, hook, or the elon, snake, phonetic series, yielding ak consonant. Accordingly, a plausible phonetic assembly reads Su, crocodile, bek, which aligns closely with the hypothesized SUBEYİ or SUBEK, lord of the waters, form. Moreover, the deity SOBEK has elsewhere been associated with epithets and doublets referencing Suchus, further corroborating the primacy of the Turkic Su root in his name. This convergence of phonetic, semantic, and iconographic evidence strengthens the argument for a Turkic linguistic substratum in theophoric naming within ancient Egyptian religion. SOBEK and the Turkish military title SUBEYİ. While the modern Turkish military title SUBEYİ is conventionally explained as a compound of Su, army, military force, and bey, lord, leader, in Old Turkic, the evidence presented here compels us to go far deeper. In the earliest phases of ancient Egyptian statehood, the figure of SOBEK, the lord of the waters and a supreme guardian of the realm, embodied not only fertility and the life-giving Nile but also the highest martial authority. SOBEK was associated with pharaonic power and military prowess, served additionally as a protective deity with apotropaic qualities, invoked especially for protecting others from the dangers presented by the Nile. The linguistic and functional overlap with the Turkish SUBEYİ is neither coincidental nor marginal. It reflects a shared cultural linguistic heritage in which Turkic language elements are visibly embedded within the very fabric of early Egyptian civilization. This connection is not a vague parallel arising from later intercultural contact. On the contrary, the Su element, denoting water, life, and cosmic vitality, appears in both traditions as a sacred, civilization-defining root, while Bek Bey functions identically in both Egyptian and Turkic contexts to denote rulership, command, and noble authority. Such a precise correspondence in both form and function is a linguistic and historical marker of the Turkic imprint on the formative stages of Egyptian state ideology and military hierarchy. The relationship between SOBEK and SUBEYİ thus stands as a clear, enduring witness to the presence and influence of Turkic thought and language in the earliest monumental civilization of the Nile. For over 5 millennia, the same core linguistic elements have persisted unchanged in meaning and status into the modern Turkish military lexicon, surviving every wave of political and cultural transformation. This is yet another decisive example of how the Turkish language and worldview not only participated in but indeed crowned the foundation of ancient Egypt's cultural and military structures. The rank of SUBEYİ in the Turkish military system. In the modern Turkish armed forces, Turk Silahlı Kuvvetleri, TSK, the title SUBEYİ designates commissioned officers whose rank extends from second lieutenant, teğmen, up to general admiral of the army or navy, or general or amiral. Definition and duties. SUBEYİ officers are entrusted with responsibilities including command, administration, planning, training, operations, and overall unit leadership. They serve as the primary command structure linking the strategic directives of the general staff with the tactical execution of military units. Rank structure, lowest to highest. As teğmen, second lieutenant candidate, officers commencing service after reserve officer training, or serving short-term commissioned duty. Teğmen, second lieutenant. Üsteğmen, first lieutenant. Yüzbaşı, captain. Binbaşı, major. Yarbay, lieutenant colonel. Albay, colonel. Tugeneral Tomiral, brigadier general rear admiral, lower half. Tumgeneral Tumamiral, major general rear admiral, upper half. Korgeneral Koramiral, lieutenant general vice admiral. Orgeneral or amiral, general admiral. This modern hierarchical system preserves the core meaning of SUBEYİ as military leader, a role which, as argued in this study, may carry linguistic and symbolic continuity from the ancient Egyptian SOBEK, the supreme martial authority and protector of the realm. 6. Swnw, Aswan, as a medical and linguistic nexus. The region known in antiquity as SWNW, Swnw, later rendered in Coptic as Suan and Arabized as as-double, occupied a strategic position at Egypt's southern frontier with Nubia, modern northern Sudan. Beyond its geographical significance, Swnw holds a remarkable distinction in ancient Egyptian history. It was a recognized center of medical knowledge and practice. Archaeological excavations in the area have uncovered medical facilities, surgical instruments, and papyri inscribed with medical texts, indicating a local tradition of advanced healthcare. An extraordinary linguistic coincidence, or more precisely, a linguistic continuity, emerges here. In ancient Egyptian, the very same term SWNW was also used as a professional title for physicians or medical practitioners. Thus, the name of the region and the designation of its healers were identical, suggesting that Swnw was not only a geographic center but also a professional and intellectual hub for the healing arts. When analyzed through the Turkic linguistic lens, this dual usage gains even deeper coherence. In modern Turkish, sork, health, and the root sar, to heal, to make whole, provide a semantic parallel to SWNW. The SWNW title could plausibly be reconstructed as a form akin to Salik Viren, giver of health, or Suveran, giver of life water, with the initial syllable susa, directly corresponding to Turkic roots for water and life. This reading is entirely consistent with the centrality of water in both Turkic and ancient Egyptian medical cosmologies, where the Nile's waters were regarded as a vital life-giving force. The Edwin Smith Papyrus. The world's oldest surviving surgical document. Written in hieratic script. In ancient Egypt around 1600 BC, the text describes anatomical observations and the examination, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis of 48 types of medical problems in exquisite detail. Among the treatments described are closing wounds with sutures, preventing and curing infection with honey and moldy bread, stopping bleeding with raw meat, and immobilization of head and spinal cord injuries. Translated in 1930, the document reveals the sophistication and practicality of ancient Egyptian medicine. Recto column 6, right, and 7, left, of the papyrus, pictured here, discuss facial trauma. Wikipedia. From this perspective, the linguistic evidence suggests that Swnw was more than a place name. It encoded a professional identity linked to healing, and that identity rested on a Turkic conceptual framework where water and health were intrinsically connected. This points to Turkic influence not merely as a lexical substratum, but as a dominant anastatic stratum, a living, organizing principle of language and thought in ancient Egypt. 7. Toponymic and onomastic evidence. Table 1. Su-based toponyms and names in the Nile Basin and their historical attestations. Name toponym, modern, earliest known attestation historical forms. Geographic location. Associated hydrological feature function Turkic connection, Su, Aswan.ca. 2400 BCE, Old Kingdom, SWNW, Swnw, Suan, Coptic, Southern Egypt, First Cataract, Nile Cataract, Natural Frontier Su route, Direct Phonetic Continuity Sudan. Pre-78th century CE concept. Kush, Wawat, Yam, Tarseti. South of Aswan to Nile confluence, fertile floodplains, Subu Nu variants indicating water. Nubia, Middle Kingdom, ca 2000 BCE, Nbu Nuba Nabadia. Northern Sudan, Southern Egypt. Nile corridor Nu variant of Su, Swakin. Pre-Islamic, Swakin Sorakin, Red Sea coast. Natural. Harbor. Explicit Su route Suez, Antiquity, Klizma, Greek, later Suez, Isthmus of Suez, Canal Sea connection Su route retained Suko Biblical Egyptian refs, Exodus 12 verse 37, Suko, Sukkot. Eastern Nile Delta river channels, marshlands Desu route in water settlement. Suma possibly pre-dynastic, Suma Suma, Upper Nile. River adjacent Su route Sebeka. 2500. SOBEK. Nile-wide cult centers, crocodile deity, Nile-powered Su, water, plus bay, lord, Swnw, medical, Old Kingdom Lati period. SWNW, region, SWNW, physician, Aswan region medical center by Nile Su Saw, water / health. Phonetic continuity. Despite changes in script, hieroglyphic Coptic Arabic, the Su element survives in many names either directly, Swakin, Suez, or through sound shifts, Nu, Bu, Wa variants. Hydrological emphasis. every listed location has strong ties to major water sources, cataracts, harbors, river confluences, floodplains, or canals, mirroring Turkic toponymic conventions in Central Asia. Pre-Arabic origins. All attestations predate the 7th century CE Arab expansion, making Arabic origin theories chronologically implausible. Cultural parallels. The Turkic worldview that water is the primary measure of land value aligns with ancient Egyptian settlement patterns and religious cosmology. 8. Conclusion. The cases of Aswan, Swnw and Sudan, Nubia reveal a continuous linguistic and conceptual heritage rooted in the Turkic Su, sustained from the pharaonic era through Coptic, and later recognized even in Ottoman administrative terminology. The hydrological naming logic, central to Turkic thought, was not incidental but foundational to the way ancient Egyptians perceived and organized their environment. Arabic reinterpretations, whether ethnographic, as-sudan, or color-based, aswad, represent much later overlays that fail to capture the original meaning. Modern scholarship's neglect of this evidence reflects broader biases in historical linguistics that marginalize non-Semitic, non-Indo-European contributions to the ancient world. Recognizing the Turkic linguistic and conceptual imprint on ancient Egyptian toponyms is not a matter of speculative nationalism, but of empirical historical linguistics. It restores to the record a long-suppressed truth, that the wisdom and worldview of ancient Egypt were, in part, shaped by a Turkic way of thinking, in which water was the primal measure of land, life, and civilization itself.